Welcome, everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome to the side event on the intergenerational transfer of knowledge towards an inclusive future, a tribute to Stephen Esti, which is co-sponsored by Canada and the Permanent Mission of Italy to the United Nations. My name is Lorraine Pelot. I'm the Director General of the Office for Disability Issues in the Government of Canada. I'm pleased to be moderating this session and look forward to the discussion today. Please note that the webcast is also being provided on UN Web TV. Welcome to everyone who's watching on this platform. In the room, we have international sign language and English captioning available. For those joining us online, English captioning is available. French captioning, or langue des signes québécoise, is not available. We therefore ask that panelists speak only in English to allow for interpretation. If a question is posed in French, a high-level interpretation will need to be provided either by the speaker or one of the Government of Canada representatives in the room. I'd like to welcome our panelists, Ms. Christina Namisniowski, the Senior Associate Deputy Minister with the Government of Canada, sitting immediately to my right. The Honourable Alessandra Locatelli, Minister for Disabilities of Italy, will share her remarks in a video presentation. With us in the room today is Isai Esti and Anne McRae. Manuela Ms. Rubianagrut Arias, Disability and Gender Program Specialist with the United Nations Youth Office. Nicole Flynn, one of our Canadian youth delegates. And we also have Serafino Corti, the coordinator of the Scientific Technical Committee of the National Observatory on Disabilities, who will be participating in our discussion on behalf, later on behalf of Italy. It's my great pleasure to present our first speakers, Isai Esti and Anne McRae. Anne McRae brings over 30 years of experience in the disability sector. She's worked at both the national and provincial levels for both nonprofits and government. She has over a decade of experience working for the federal government at various levels in Halifax, Vancouver, and at the Office for Disability Issues in Ottawa, the capital. Isai Esti is the son of Steve Esti and Anne McRae. He graduated from Dartmouth High School and attended the Achieve program at the Nova Scotia Community College and the Independent Living Nova Scotia called the RISE program, Reaching for Inclusive, Successful Education and Employment. He's currently enrolled in the Mount Ability program at Mount St. Vincent University. Isai and Anne, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anne McRae. I am a white woman with relatively short gray hair. I am profoundly hard of hearing and wear a hearing aid. And I am here as Isai's attendant. Isai uses finger spelling to communicate, and so I will be interpreting his remarks for him. I am Isai Esti. I am a young man with dark hair, light brown skin, a mustache, and a goatee, and I use a wheelchair, and I wear 2 hearing aids with red molds. I am really excited to be here. To talk to you about my dad. My mom and I were shocked at the response to his death. And the huge impact he had on people. To me, he was just Dad, a guy who traveled a lot, who told me interesting stories about the countries he visited. It is only now that I am learning a lot about the CRPD and how important it is for youth like me to get involved and make sure the CRPD helps people with disabilities to be a part of our communities around the world. At home, I am part of a group called My Home, My Rights. Chantal and I will be speaking about this at our side event called Art of Inclusion, Human Rights Education and Advocacy, led by people with disabilities labeled with an intellectual disability. We got to use art, photos, and video to talk about what human rights meant to us. We learned that it doesn't matter how you communicate, but that everyone's voice is important and needs to be heard. Steve was an amazing networker, mentor, and creator of events and projects. One of his many passions was the creation of a summer school on the CRPD to be held in Nova Scotia every year. EJ and I got to attend an event in Halifax at Dalhousie University that Sheila Wildman and Steve worked on, which was a kickoff, if you will, to the idea of having a school. Steve joined us for a few hours on the last day, and he was thrilled to see this event get off the ground. It was the last public event he attended. Neither EJ or I want to see his dream die, and we are committed to continuing this work. Perhaps the school should focus on youth and mentors. We are keen to hear from everyone here today, to hear about other ways that we can ensure the baton gets passed to this generation of advocates to continue the work that Steve was so passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you, Isai and Anne. Next, I would like to welcome Senior Associate Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development, Ms. Christina Nemisniowski with the Government of Canada. She assumed the role in 2021 with more than 30 years in the federal government. Over to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Lorraine. And like you, I would very much like to welcome all of the panelists and to thank Anne and Issei for setting us up for a really good conversation. Before I deliver my remarks, I would also like to say that I am bringing greetings from our minister, Minister Kara, who's the Canadian Minister of Disability Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities. And she was very excited about being here at the side event. But unfortunately, because Canada's Parliament is sitting, she had to return to Ottawa. And she is very much looking for our feedback on how the event went. So I know she's with us in spirit, and if she had a choice, she would be here as opposed to being sitting in our Parliament at this moment. So I would like to thank our colleagues from Italy as well for co-sponsoring today's event and being on the panel. And I certainly feel very privileged to be able to sit here with the esteemed likes of our panelists. It's quite humbling, and it's quite an honor. And maybe at the outset, I too can offer a bit of a physical description of myself. So I am a white woman. I like to say, of average height. Some might suggest that I'm on the shorter side. I have short blonde hair, and I wear dark horn-rimmed glasses. We have today a couple of our youth delegates here that you've already had a chance to hear from one. You'll have a chance to hear from another. And we brought a third gentleman with us, Aitel Hudakar, who's not here at this afternoon's event. But I thought it important to mention all three, and I won't steal the thunder from Nicole, but she will have an opportunity to participate on this panel. But we felt it was so important to have youth with us because it is really about that intergenerational transfer of knowledge and the passing of the baton and ensuring that we are doing everything within our power to really empower our youth because they will be here after many of us are gone and are really critical to helping to shape our future. So thanks again, Anne, to you and Issei for your beautiful tribute to Stephen. I think we're very privileged to have heard your reflections about the legacy of his work and who he was as a person, as a father, as a partner, and as a change maker. He was clearly a key figure in the work on the CRPD, having been a valued member of Canada's delegation during its negotiation and development, and continuing his work beyond that time. He championed a convention that brought the rights of persons with disabilities to the international fora and advocated for implementation in Canada and around the world. Stephen had a passion and ability to bring people of different backgrounds together to work towards the common goal of realizing the rights of persons with disabilities, and spent many years supporting youth leadership within the disability community. As an example, he was the president of the National Educational Association of Disabled Students in the early 1990s and continued being engaged throughout his career, working on student leadership and employment forums and creating valuable resources for youth with disabilities. He was purposeful in his efforts to educate interested parties, including youth with disabilities, in the historical development, substantive content, and engagement that led to the implementation of the CRPD both domestically and worldwide. Stephen was well known for his ability to bring key players together and had an extensive network with whom he worked. In a small way, our discussion today will build on the values that he held strong and demonstrated consistently throughout his work. Our aim is to showcase the foundational work done to develop and implement the CRPD and the emerging efforts to build towards a more inclusive future with youth leaders at the center. In Canada, 27% of the Canadian population aged 15 years and older, or about 8 million individuals, has one or more disabilities. 20% of youth aged 15 to 24 have a disability. Compared to 2017, There's been growth in that category. In 2017, the percentage of youth that reported having a disability was 13%. And of the youth that fall into that category, approximately 57% were in the labor force, compared to 61.6% of youth without disabilities. From the Prime Minister's Youth Council to the appointment of the minister with a specific mandate on youth issues to engagements with youth within the disability community, the Government of Canada has been continuously increasing efforts to foster leadership and ensure that our youth are equipped to grab that baton and continue the journey forged by the hard work and dedication of their predecessors. Within Employment and Social Development Canada and other Government of Canada departments, we are working to ensure youth with disabilities have platforms to learn, to share, and to lead in the continued realization of their rights. We have established and funded youth-focused leadership programs and projects and increased opportunities for youth participation in international and other fora, including the Canadian delegation here at COSP, as I mentioned. We've already learned so much from our youth in Canada who have been vocal about the unique challenges they face and the types of supports they need to build the leadership skills required to take over the reins. Youth with disabilities have shared that they face barriers while transitioning into higher education and from school into the workforce. They face a lack of opportunities to gain meaningful work experience and to build leadership skills, particularly through internships and mentorships. They've called for increased opportunities to connect with each other and with employers, to build professional networks, and to collaborate on fostering inclusive spaces. Such opportunities allow youth to carve out meaningful and stable employment, but are often out of reach due to stigma and the lack of financial support. And that's why within Canada, we are funding programs such as the Youth Innovation component of our Enabling Accessibility Fund, where we are supporting youth with opportunities to develop leadership skills and gain real experience that they can leverage toward their career path. Our youth accessibility leaders work in partnership with organizations and businesses to increase the accessibility and inclusion of their communities, leading the change on demonstrating the needs and benefits of the projects and working to see these improvements through. Our Youth Employment and Skill Strategy program focuses on youth facing multiple barriers to employment by supporting them to gain work experience and to develop the skills they need to transition into the labor market. And in 2023, a new stream designed to address the unique barriers to employment encountered by youth with disabilities was launched. And while employment is an absolute priority, so is the development and continuation of advocacy. In the spirit of Stephen's ability to connect and collaborate, we need to create more opportunities for learning through mentorship, where, again, as I mentioned earlier, we can pass the baton to the next generation. We are so proud and encouraged by the leadership that we are seeing, and to witness firsthand the growth and advancement of some of the youth leaders we have directly supported in previous years. We have, hopefully within the audience, May Banting, who has been a member of l'Arche's international delegates to COSP, and she began her advocacy journey through a Government of Canada funded youth project called Leading Change. And the project brought together youth leaders labeled as having intellectual disabilities from across Canada, supported the development of their leadership skills and self-confidence, and engaged them in meetings within their communities. And by taking part in these domestic and international opportunities, youth with disabilities are contributing to the momentum to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. And together, we must continue to maintain this momentum and create the space and opportunity for our youth. So I really look forward to hearing from our next generation so that we can better strengthen disability inclusion together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Damasnowski. And May is right in the middle of the audience, so it's great. Thank you for everything you've done, May. We now welcome a video presentation from Minister Alessandra Locatelli. She has served as Italy's Minister for Disabilities since October 2022.
Dear Minister Kera and dear all, it's a real pleasure to be with you today, albeit in video, to extend a warm greeting and to share some reflection on this meaningful event. We are living in a difficult time for the world, and it's increasingly important to find leaders determined to meet the challenge of the inclusion and everyone's right to full participation in civil, social and political life of our countries. We need shared priorities, the commitment to undermine ancient practices and to overcome fragmentation in responses to needs, also from bureaucratic point of view. I'm convinced that we can always do more and better if we work together with the world of the third sector and associations, and if we are able to team up between our countries. These are some of the topics that we also want to cover at the next G7 ministerial meeting of inclusion and disability in Italy. And I'm confident that Canada, as the next presidency of G7, will want and will be able to continue on the path that we have all taken together for an effective inclusion of the person with disabilities. Thank you very much and good work.
Thank you to Minister Locatelli for her remarks. As I mentioned, we have with us Serafino Corti, who will participate in the discussion later. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome Ms. Manuel Rubiana Groot Arias. She is the Disability Inclusion and Gender Focal Point with the United Nations Youth Office. Ms. Rubiana Groot Arias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorraine. I know my last name is a bit tricky. My name is Manuela Rubiano Groot Arias, and I'm the the Gender and Disability Focal Point for the UN Youth Office, and thank you all for being here today. We appreciate, of course, the permanent missions of Canada and Italy to the UN for inviting us today. It is a pleasure to participate in this space within the Conference of State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and I'm sending my regards also on behalf of the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, Dr. Felipe Polier. So first of all, just to tell you a bit more about our office was created by member states through General Assembly resolution from September 2022, and the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs was appointed in December 2023 to move forward the office's mandate on promoting meaningful youth engagement within the UN system and with member states. And as an office, we recognize that young people are not an homogeneous group. Age, disability, gender, race, class, and ethnicity, among many other factors, shape their lived experiences, the capacities they hold, and the barriers they face. Specifically, we know that young persons with disabilities are some of the most marginalized constituencies, even more so when they're living in crisis-affected or fragile settings. However, despite these increasing challenges posed by the pandemic, climate change, and increasing political and geopolitical tensions, young persons with disabilities are leading change and demanding a seat in the table. This is why today as an office, we're happy to support young people with disabilities and young women with disabilities who are attending the conference for the first time and engaging in a meaningful way in different conversations. It is our responsibility to continuously respond to young people with disabilities needs and remove barriers for their meaningful participation. To advance in this direction, our office and the Youth 2030 Task Team on Young Persons with Disabilities recently launched a global research on young persons with disabilities and their meaningful engagement in decision-making spaces. It was designed together with young people with disabilities and their organizations And the research itself shows us how when accessibility and reasonable accommodations are provided during the process, young people with disabilities can and will contribute on an equal basis with others. The research, of course, and the whole objective of the document is to set a solid evidence base for informed decision-making by governments and the UN system. And some of the key findings from the research that I want to share with you today include that, first of all, young persons with disabilities between 15 and 24 years old are around 2% of the global population, but this is already a likely underestimation. Also, we know that around 29% of these young people have never attended school, and rates in rural areas are even higher. The literacy rate within the population of young persons with disabilities is 60%, which is significantly lower than the 91% literacy rate among young persons without disabilities. And only 23% of young persons with disabilities are employed. Notably, we now know that 50% of young women with disabilities are neither in school nor employed, and instead are engaged in unpaid care work. The research also recognizes that ICT is vital to achieving SDGs such as education, healthcare, and employment, and ICT is also a means to access information, especially in crisis and humanitarian settings, participate in civic and political discourse, and for young people with disabilities to advocate for their rights. However, youth leadership in the digital era faces barriers. Despite being the most connected generation, intra-generational inequality persists. Young persons with disabilities in middle-income countries drive digital transformation, but in low-income countries, accessibility and affordability are key constraints. According to this global research, we know that in low and middle-income countries, only about 17% of young persons with disabilities have internet access. As an international community, it is our responsibility to address these gaps. The UN's work on youth is guided by the Youth 2030 strategy, and the reporting from this strategy in 2023 shows us that out of 132 UN country teams, 98 or 74% engage with young persons with disabilities and their networks. However, we also have from the research findings that while the right intentions are in place, more needs to be done for youth engagement to be meaningful, moving away from tokenism. Ahead of the Summit of the Future, we celebrate the revision 1 of the Pact for the Future, which refers to persons with disabilities, and Chapter 4, which has member states' commitment to eliminate all barriers that impact young persons with disabilities participation and investment in assistive technologies to promote their rights. So today I want to end with 2 key steps moving forward. First of all, institutions and decision makers must be accountable and ensure the implementation of existing tools and strategies. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, and the Youth 2030 Strategy, together with the UN system's gender equality strategies, are complementary tools that guide our work and ensure accountability. We must avoid regressions in the human rights of young persons with disabilities and instead provide support to advance those rights, including the care and support systems in the language of the Pact of the Future. Second, targeted and flexible support to youth-led civil society is needed to promote young people with disabilities capacities and resources to engage in decision-making. The Summit's Pact for the Future already requests the Secretary General to develop a global youth investment platform to attract and better finance youth-led programming. Our global research also recommends increasing investments for youth with disabilities and their organizations. This includes the provision of flexible and accessible funding to networks of youth with disabilities and promoting their fair employment within governments and the UN system itself. The UN Youth Office looks forward to continue working together for disability inclusion, meaningful youth engagement, and gender equality to be at the center of our cooperation frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rihanna Groot Arias. Our final speaker today is Nicole Flynn, one of the 3 youth candidates we have on our Canadian delegation this year. Nicole is a graduate of the Loyalist College General Arts and Science program. She is the CEO of Nicole Flynn Enterprises, where she offers presentations and interactive workshops. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of states, civil society organizations, and participants of COSP who are joining us in the room and online. For the description, I wear glasses and 2 hearing aids. I also have Down syndrome, but that does not define who I am as a person. And I want to say dusty, blonde, shoulder length hair. The point is, in Ontario, Canada, where I am from, I am involved on a variety of committees. Some are with self-advocates, like me. Some are with community members of community members of diverse backgrounds. My role is valuable because I am breaking down barriers of stereotypes and changing the unconscious bias that affects people's attitude. I am seen as a whole person. In my experience, youth who live with disability want to be involved, listened to, and heard as a valuable voice. To do this, there needs to be communication, connection, and collaboration within the local and global community. We need to move from where we were in the past through now to improve, breaking down barriers to create an accessible and inclusive future for all. Who is speaking at your table? Communication empowers people. There are many modes of communication, and each person has a valid point. There are different perspectives from different views, and each opinion has the right to be stated. It is vital that youth have the opportunity to share their opinion. The more discussion there is, the greater awareness there will be. And this will lead to positive change. To empower youth is to develop leaders who can stand up, speak out, and advocate. What shape is your table? Connecting around the table matters. It is important to have a middle ground where everyone is connected, free to express their opinion, and is treated equally as a member. If you have multiple associates, scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, youth with diverse backgrounds and fields of expertise, all gathered at the same table. And the people are connecting through discussion. Then you are creating a community of voices that extend beyond the table. A table of equality takes away the point of small groups, making all the decisions, and creates a space where everyone connects and contributes to the discussion, where each person has equal opportunity to participate and share in the roles and responsibilities. What size is your table? Collaboration matters. It is important to get to know the people around your table. Find out their skills, their unique abilities. From there, you can build from their creative ideas and identify roles that add to the discussion. Getting to know the people on your team gives you something to work with, something to stimulate thoughts. Building on skills is a way to learn about the team. Being open to evaluation identifies strengths and allows growth. Learning about each other gives room for the table to expand, creating space for new creative ideas. Collaboration means a team is able to work together to share the work evenly. Leadership roles of youth are very important in order to understand the emic perspective of lived experience. Youth are aware of the things that need to change for authentic inclusion to occur. Increasing the voice of youth is significant, not only within the disability sector community, but within states, and on the world stage. Empowering youth today increases the movement towards authentic inclusion for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for those excellent remarks. I'll open the floor now for discussion. In particular, I'm hoping we might focus on passing the baton to our youth, meaning handing over space and opportunities for youth with disabilities to assume leadership roles both within and outside the disability community. What practically should we do or do we need to do? What does passing the baton look like in practice? And in the spirit of the leader who inspired this event, I'd also invite participants to share their own stories and experiences with Stephen Este if you are comfortable in doing so. Stephen's work touched so many lives around the world. I expect we could benefit from hearing some of those stories.
Is this on?
I'm the executive director for the United States International Council on Disabilities. In 2021, when the US pulled out of Afghanistan, we had a situation where there was many Afghans with disabilities who were seeking to evacuate from the country and escape from the Taliban. And what we found was the people the Afghans that made it to Pakistan were living in and are still living in very dire circumstances where receiving very basic minimal things is very hard. The discrimination is outrageous. They're being shaken down for money from the police, and they're threatened with, being sent back to Afghanistan. They're not allowed to work. They don't receive asylum status, and they are waiting for US visas and Canadian visas. And so Stephen and I got together with advocates Sadiq Mohibi and Benafsha Yakubi, both two Afghans with disabilities who made it out of the country. And we were working on ideas of how can we keep attention on this issue and, advocate for visas for these Afghans with disabilities. We wrote to the Secretary General. We had an event in Geneva that was sponsored by the Canadian Mission. We did a side event last year at the COSP on Afghan women with disabilities. And a lot of the progress that we made was due to Steve's fabulous connections at very high levels. So I'll always be grateful for his efforts in working with me on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. I'll go here and then Christopher.
Yes.
I'm not here speaking as a disabled person, obviously, because my partner, who is disabled, Richard Reeser, he's the secretary of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, and he's chairing an online event at the moment, which is young people with autism in Africa. I first met Steve at the CRPD at the UN here many years ago, probably 20 years ago, and later at the setting up of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. And it was restarted in 2019, and he was always on the executive of the group, so that's sort of been left out of the discussion here. last year, the group did do an online training for young people so that they could actually take over the disability movement, but they do need training first. And so you can't just take any disabled person and hope they understand the history, the stigmas, the politics, all of it. And they thought the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum worked out a really good online training for young disabled people, because they realized that most people who run the disability movement are older, and it was very important for young people to take over. I'm very glad that Manuela, I think, listed that many disabled children are not in school. That's a thing that my husband's spoken about often. And there's no point going on about what levels everybody's reached when thousands of disabled young people aren't in school all over the world. So basically, I just want to end with the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum have an inclusion action plan which they're trying to take to Chogham in October in Samoa. And lots of governments have already agreed it, so we hope other governments will. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Christopher, and then back there, and then Michael. Christopher.
First, I'd like to thank the youth for and the panel today for all that you shared. I know you asked about how we pass the baton on, but listening to them today, I'm very confident that they actually have the baton passed on to them, that we are in a wonderful future because of them, and I want to thank them for sharing their stories and their words today. I think everyone in this room has a connection to Steve in some way or another, and to think that one particular incident or one project that you may have worked on is very difficult for most of us. Steve was a short man, but a man that was larger than life. He would come into the room and he would know everyone. He would make time for everyone, and no one was too important for him. He always had you on the attention that you deserved, and always had words of wisdom and advice. I want to thank Anne and Asa for sharing Steve with us. He is their family, but he was also our family. So thank you for sharing him with us and letting us have the best of him, because Steve has made a massive difference in the lives of millions across the world. And I know that you miss him dearly, and we do as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had one at the back, and then Michael, and then over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful panel. I'm Janet Lord. I'm also with the U.S. International Council on Disabilities and the Harvard Law School Project on Disability. Both of those organizations benefited greatly from Steve's leadership and friendship and wise counsel. I couldn't possibly begin to recount the number of opportunities we had to learn from him, work with him. But Steve was the very first person outside of the United States who I spoke with about the Disability Treaty and this initiative that Mexico had started before the UN General Assembly. And at the time, I was working with a landmine survivor organization, and Steve was very big in the mine action world up in Canada, but also a part of, then we didn't really talk about disability inclusive development, but he was doing it back then, and certainly a big leader in the disability rights community. So my colleague said, you better call Steve, and talk to him about this treaty process. And I said, well, who's Steve? And she's like, Steve Esty, of course. So Steve was also present at the very first meetings we had in Washington, trying to understand what this initiative was all about that Mexico was doing. And Steve was there, of course, for each and every negotiating session. And he has been an incredible leader in the implementation of the treaty. Every single article. I don't think there was a single article in the treaty that he didn't have a hand in terms of its drafting, and then a hand in terms of its implementation. But one recurring theme was always mentoring the young leaders, young people with disabilities. And he talked about it from the moment I met him, about how we must be cultivating young leaders. And he certainly did that throughout his incredible career in disability rights and international disability rights, in international humanitarian work, and in disability inclusive development work. And it is so wonderful to see Anne and Issei up there. And I know Steve is cheering you on.
Thank you very much. Wonderful comments. Michael.
Thank you, Michael Goddard, the Canadian Accessibility Commissioner. So I have a question for the panel. I was listening to a radio show the other day, and the topic was whether the voting age in Canada should be lowered to 16 from 18. And a number of the callers who called in said, well, we know that young brains, people, the brain isn't fully developed until 25. And so, maybe we should raise the voting age rather than lowering the voting age. And so what would you say to somebody who says young people's minds aren't fully developed and can't understand the complexities of politics and the world? What would you say to them?
Who would like to provide a response? Mr. Corti.
Yeah, I try to respond. It's very complicated question. I don't think that to find a target, to define who can vote is a good idea, because the ability, the intelligence, it can be an opportunity, but it's not a value. The right to vote is independent of intelligence, of development of the brain. And so I think that we have to support the people to best communicate, to understand what is happening, but I don't feel good to find a level that decide who can vote or who can't vote. I hope to be clear.
Thank you. Nicole.
Well, I can try to answer your question, sir. It actually depends on how about you go?
Well, actually, from the UN Youth Office, we've been working for a while on young people's participation in politics. We've been supporting the Be Seen, Be Heard campaign together with the Body Shop. And we also supported a while ago the Not Too Young to Run campaign. And this campaign, it is a global campaign that advocates for aligning the age requirement for running for political office with the official voting age. And the ultimate goal is to contribute to greater and improved youth representation and participation in political leadership. And one of the aims of the campaign precisely was to advocate and end discrimination against young people and discriminatory attitudes and practices towards young people running for public office, and therefore for increased participation of young people in politics and governments. So I don't think this idea of increasing the voting age until 25 with the argument of people's brains being fully developed only until 25 would be much aligned with what we think. It creates actually the idea that young people between 14 and 25, which is the official youth range, or 15 and 30 in a wider spectrum, don't have the capacity to vote in an informed way, especially when we see not only voting, because of course our political participation is not only limited to our exercise as voters, but also what we do in terms of political advocacy and public spaces. When we see, for example, the climate action movement, young people, many young people around the world are leading that kind of initiatives. And we can't assume or think or create the tag that young people that are leading that kind of movement, feminist movements, intergenerational and intersectional approaches in social justice, don't have the capacities to make informed decisions, to request more and better actions from governments and the UN system. So I wouldn't agree. But this is also my personal opinion and based on what the office's work has been on political participation for young people until now. Thank you.
May I jump in quickly? Because I can actually answer that question correctly. I'm going to have a spin-off of what Morella just mentioned. It really comes down to is to know your members of the table, around your table, and to build from their skills and get their ideas, and to contribute that effort, like you said, from different countries. We have to have a different perspectives. Doesn't matter if we look different. The matter is our voice is being heard. The more we get out there, the more the awareness is being spread around. That's what matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those thoughtful responses. So I have Catherine next.
The empowering, engaging youth with the training. I think I don't know the program, so I'm not qualifying the program or not. The experience I have presently, I have two groups. Just spontaneously have asked for help from me. I am not an organization. I am simply a mom. One group are young adults doing research, independent. They have chosen a topic that they are researching in the population of persons with an intellectual disability in Ontario. Another group, a self-advocacy group that want to increase awareness about disability for employers, developmental support workers, as well as self-advocates around Ontario. Where I find if we want to say education or for people, not knowing how to write a grant, needing help with grant writing. The other, emails, understanding how to respond appropriately, when to respond, how to address some of those administration things, some of the simply doing doodle polls to understand how to work into people's schedules. Those administration things are, and needing it on, or what do they call it when you send out a link and it automatically goes to your Google Calendar thing. They, like having it right there into their calendar that, they don't have to scrounge for it. Planning stages, wanting to jump to the third step, knowing they need to do step 1 and 2, but really not knowing how to do step 1 and 2. So I think more breaking it down, learning, taking what it is they want to accomplish and how to put it into task. Networking. I find persons, especially people who are labeled with an intellectual disability, have small social networks. and do not have contact with people who are decision makers. Not even a lot with other self-advocates. So being able to reach out, and many that contact me are not involved with an association or organization. So they're on their own and they want help. And those are areas where I'm educating people, trying to reach out. And many times I'm scrambling to figure out the answer so that I can, okay, I got it, let's learn this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lots of great ideas. Just before I go to the next question, I did want to give Mr. Corky a chance we just heard a lot of some good ideas of ways to engage youth. I'm wondering if Italy has additional thoughts that they would like to contribute on how to engage youth.
Thank you. Yes, I tried to share good practice that we are implementing in Italy that can be useful to promote the youth leadership. In Italy, we recently approved a new law called the Life Project. We believe that this new law represents an extraordinary opportunity for people with disability to fulfill their desire, values, and aspiration. This journey, which requires a deep understanding and respect for individual desires, not only fosters human potential, but can also serve a powerful driver for the emergence of new youth leadership among people with disability. This new leader will be essential in promoting and defending the rights of people with disability. Life Project focuses on the person with disability, emphasizing their desire and aspiration and their right to have the opportunity to fulfill them. Through the Life Project, people with disability become active agents in their own lives. Such a vision has significant implications. It means believing in the potential of people with disability and investing in them so that they too believe in their full potential. We believe that when people include those with disability, experience their own value, and have the opportunity to pursue them, they can also discover the desire to lead not only themselves, but also others. This is how leaders are born, people who discover their own potential and understand that it's not only an opportunity for them, but also a duty to others. Investing in a life project means not only respecting the right of all people to self-determination, but also offering more opportunities for people with disability to discover within our desire and aspiration the will to lead others in developing their potential and their desire to be full citizens of this world.
Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent remarks, ideas. I have 3 people, I have 5 minutes, I have 3 minutes, and I have 3 people remaining on the question list, so I'd like to get to them before we break. So I have a gentleman at the back.
Much for organizing this event dedicated to Steve, a good friend of mine. My name is Nagase, and I'm the Secretary General of Inclusion International, but I now talk as a member of the disability community in Japan, where I come from. I was so happily surprised to meet Han and Isan on Monday. I have known Steve for many years, maybe more than 30 years, when I was the regional officer of the DPI Asia Pacific. By that time, I felt most keenly Steve's big heart and open-mindedness was when Canada was pre-reviewed by the CIPD committee in August 2016 for the list of issues. Japan just submitted its initial report, and we were trying to learn the process. When our big delegation, including young leaders, visited the working group in Geneva that was drafting the list of issues to Canada, Canadian civil society and OPDs, led by Stephen, really welcomed us into every process in such a transparent way. That was so impressive and so helpful. They invited us to some very private sessions with heated discussions sometimes. We were even invited to the reception for the Canadian Embassy in Geneva for the Canadian civil society. So we really enjoyed the drinks and food. Thank you. I have very good photos with Stephen them, which I have shared with Stephen's family. We learned much and this helped us prepare for our review later in 2022. And this experience had a much impact on us, particularly on our young leaders. When Japan was reviewed in 2022, one young Chinese graduate student approached us, asking us if she could observe our private sessions. I immediately remember the generosity of the Canadian group led by Stephen. I consulted my colleagues of Japan Disability Forum, who remember the help of the Canadian friends, and particularly from Stephen, and we agreed to welcome her. This is one thing we and I learned from Steve. I hope to remember whatever I learned from Steve and practice it and hopefully convey it to the younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to the next question. Yes. And then May.
I'll be very brief then. So I just wanted, so I first met Steve exactly on the first Canadian reporting to the CRPD. After the pre-report, there was a flag on the lack of data on children. And that's how, my name is Keiko Shikako. I'm a Canada Research Chair in Childhood Disability at McGill University. And that was how the whole story unfolded for my participation here. For many, I think this is the 5th COSP I'm attending, and the reporting in Geneva with the Canadian delegation, and learning so much on how to even think of research with children and young people, and how that can inform important policy processes and decisions, both locally, domestic changes and conversations, and internationally. My gratitude to Isaac and Anne to the privilege of being part of this conversations. Steve was, as everybody mentioned, so generous in sharing time and connections and introducing everyone. And then perhaps a little call for action or question for the panel, if we have time, the time left, is how we could create like structures, both in Canada and internationally with the UN, to have youth not only participating and coming and attending those forums, but ongoing training, capacity building, create structures where youth can be engaged throughout the year, and the reporting process, the parallel reporting, the meetings here at the COSP, the meetings in Geneva, so in the whole process, and then locally in their local communities, schools, and across health, rehabilitation, all the different fronts. So I would love to hear thoughts, if we have time, but later on to continue the conversations on how we can create that to make it more effective participation.
Excellent question. I think we'll have to pursue it offline, unfortunately, but I do want to leave the last word with May, please.
My name is May Banting. I knew Steve since I was very young. I saw Steve at Dalhousie. He told me I should be a leader. I miss him.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for both sharing your views and also sharing in the memory of Steve Este. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and I encourage the efforts to continue to include youth in these conversations and in various fora around the world. Thank you very much.